Hey everyone, Imperius here. I'm going to talk some X-Men today with my buddy Doc. If anybody who's followed my channel even remotely, which I'm surprised if you do, you'll know that Doc was the first person I had on my channel, period. So it's going to be great getting back into this and talking about a particular comic book that we both thoroughly enjoy. And my TV is not muted on the other side. God damn it. Anyways.
Technical difficulties.
That's bound to happen with me once in a while. Anyways, Doc, how you doing, buddy?
I am doing good, brother. It's nice to be back. You're
always welcome here.
Oh, I appreciate it. It's kind of fun to do an evening stream from time to time.
Yeah, Wes has got you getting up at the ass crack of dawn.
It's not like I don't get up at the ass crack of dawn anyway.
Yeah, but it's a day off when you don't have to get up at the ass crack of dawn normally.
Yeah,
hey,
exactly.
Wes seems like good people. That I love the comics aficionado. I'm not awake when you guys do it live, but I catch it during my work shift. It's a good way to kill a couple hours out of the work shift, and
it's always fun. It's a great time, but doing this on a weekday evening is great. I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to be with everybody in the chat. This is and you know what? When you approached me about doing this, so we could get into something positive, we're used to dealing with a lot of the news and what's new, what's going on currently. When we're on Comics Aficionados, this is kind of, and Wes and I don't do Wes does his retrospectives, but he does those with other people. He always gets me for the new stuff.
He always gets you for the bad stuff.
He does. I think he's just torturing me, and I love him for it.
I mean, considering the state of modern X-Men, good Lord.
Yeah, it is. But you know what? There's a lot. I mean, you got 50, I'd say a solid 50 years.
Oh, yeah.
Of good. It's only the last 10 that I would consider kind of a wash, if not otherwise ignorable.
I mean, because I read House of X and Powers of 10 or Powers of X, whatever the fuck they wanted to call it. Yeah. It was good, but it didn't feel like the X-Men to me.
No, it didn't. It was something completely new. It was something completely different. And there was some intrigue there because it was going in a completely new direction. A lot of the writers for the past maybe 6-7 years before that had basically been just treading water or always retreading old ground. So going in a completely new direction seemed it was a great change of pace, and I was looking forward to it. But there were some obvious flaws in it.
Well, yeah.
And I had a little too much faith that both Jonathan Hickman, I still had a higher opinion of him than I do now. Back then, that he would see those flaws and close those gaps before the series moved on, and he failed to. And then once we got into the let's just say talent evaluation side of it,
that's
yeah. But as a result, I think a lot of us have decided to go back and pick up stuff that we hadn't read, and even go reread a lot of the stuff that we did that we truly loved.
Yeah,
at the time.
I mean, I've kind of been doing that with old school pro wrestling.
Oh yeah, watching like Attitude Era,
pre that,
and like even like Rock and Wrestling Connection.
Yeah, mostly a lot of the stuff that I didn't see growing up because of where I'm, back in the early '80s, it was still the territories, and being up in the Northeast, you probably were the same. We got WWF,
yes,
and that's it.
Yeah, we got Vince, and we got his Saturday morning Superstars show.
Every once in a while you'd catch like AWA on ESPN.
Yeah.
When I went to go visit my grandmother in Western PA, for whatever reason, she had TBS.
Yes. and you could see WCW, well,
Uh-huh.
NWA.
Yeah, the Jim Crockett promotion. So I've
Yep.
gone back and watched like some of the Jim Crockett promotion stuff because you hear a lot of the stories about how great that stuff was, and a lot of it really, really was.
Mm-hmm. You got that like old school wrestling
Mm-hmm.
style, which was, I mean, it had a little bit of hints of the stuff that, Vince was doing. It had some of that,
A bit more
especially
grounded.
once, yeah, but a little more grounded. You started seeing it with guys like Sting
Yeah,
and Lex Luger go in that different way than, like the Horsemen were, because the Horsemen were a little more old school wrestling style.
mm.
Um, and especially that feud that was going on in like what would have that have been like 1990.
Yeah, or even
Yeah.
like the stuff with Flair and Dusty Rhodes,
Oh yeah.
them
Uh,
going back and forth for what felt like ever.
yes. In the and then both one of them would jump to over to WWF, and
Mm-hmm.
then they jump back. Then the other one would jump to WWF and then jump back.
Back, yep.
Yeah.
I think I
And
was watching SummerSlam from '89 the other night, and the amount of Jim Crockett promotion guys that were in the WWF at the time was like, huh.
oh yeah.
And they were all in pretty significant spots. You had Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson. You had Dusty Rhodes at the time. You had Rugged Ronnie Garvin. You had Barry Windham.
Uh-huh.
And not too long after that, the Road Warriors show up there, and Flair shows up there, and it's like,
Yep.
and at the time, as a kid, I had no idea.
Yeah, you just thought they were new guys, and
Or they wrestled somewhere else that
yeah. So
because I'd always heard about the Road Warriors before I ever saw them.
oh yeah, I did too. And then but then they came as Legion of Doom, and I'm like, that's not their name.
Yeah, I forgot the reasoning behind that. It was
Uh,
either the fact that they didn't want to tie them to their Jim Crockett personas, they were still the same.
I think it
Promos the same way, or it was something to do with the movie.
I think, well, I think it might have had a little bit to do with the movie and Vince, but Vince would have been like all about cashing in on that.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think what it was is Vince was always good for wanting a name that he could trademark.
Yes.
And they probably were unwilling to give him their name. So he's like, fine, I'll give you a new name.
Yeah, it's entirely possible too.
That I do own the rights to. So whenever they left, they went back to their real names, and he got a name that didn't mean anything and that he probably had to pay DC Comics money for.
That's entirely possible. But then again, with the way wrestling works, sometimes you see some stuff, you're like, wait a minute. How are you guys getting away with this?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Japanese pro wrestling is really good for that because they play licensed music and
yeah,
fucks given equals 0.
Yeah, no, they ECW was good for that too.
Mm-hmm.
In the very early 90s.
Oh yeah,
I remember watching them at like 3 a.m.
Yeah, they were always on late, like ESPN 2.
Yeah, well, here it was on like KBL, which was whatever channel that the Penguins and the Pirates were on.
Really?
But it was at like 3 a.m. on a Saturday night. That was it. And it was grainy as hell. Half the time it was like the entire channel was like remember on old VHS?
Yeah,
like,
yeah, to adjust the tracking. Yeah.
It was like the tracking was off. And they were just like, we don't care. There's nobody here. This is on autoplay.
Yeah.
There's nobody here to adjust the tracking. If you're watching a scrambled show, who cares? It's 3 a.m.
Yeah. Joe, I believe Doc does have a channel, but there's less on it than what's on my channel.
Yeah, I put up like one video a year. I think I have like maybe 2. I think I have like 8 videos over 4 or 5 years, something like that. And most of them are stupid little bullshit ones. I don't even know. Honestly, I don't even know what my channel is. I could probably find it.
But if you want to hear more of Doc, which you should because he's right more often than not.
Yep.
Sorry, Wes. You can go find Doc on this channel every Saturday morning with a panel of a bunch of other great dudes. This is where I was, in a roundabout way, got introduced to Doc.
Yeah.
And Ellie recommended checking that channel out. There's a lot of great content on there. Wes is a really decent guy from what I can gather.
He is. And he had this really, really dope interview
just
a couple of days ago with Mark Miller, where he went on there right after the news broke about him doing that $1.99 book, and him testing the waters there, as well as he had a couple other announcements that he made on Wes's show. Nothing exactly specific, but that he's got some
stuff in the works.
Some new work coming out in early to mid next year from like Frank Quitely, Lionel Yu, Olivier Copiel, and I think even Stuart Immonen. Or no, Steve McNiven. So yeah, he's got new stuff coming from all those guys.
Definitely like some of Millar's stuff, like Nemesis. I thought was rather good.
I love Nemesis. Honestly, there's only a handful of his things that I've read that I didn't like. Like I know everybody talks about like the great British and Scottish writers.
The British invasion, as they like to call it.
Yeah, and everybody always puts Morrison up there.
He's
honestly,
okay.
I think Miller has a much higher batting average.
Yes,
than Grant Morrison.
Morrison's done some okay stuff. I did like his Batman run.
Yeah, he's when he's on, he's on.
But when he's one of those guys. But when he's off,
yeah,
dear God, it's bad.
It's a total strikeout. Not to mention, I still will never forgive him for killing Wildstorm.
Yeah. And his X-Men run wasn't all that great either, in my opinion.
Well, all that was like a really, really interesting cover band doing Chris Claremont's greatest hits. It was like Tool did a live album a number of years ago where like half of it was covers. I think it was I can't remember the name of the album, but it was a live album. Like half of it was covers, and all of them were very, very unique takes on really, really good songs. The only problem was they're not the originals, and as much as they're good, I want to see Tool play Tool, not do somebody else's greatest hits. And that's kind of what Morrison's X-Men was. Even when Mark Miller did Ultimate X-Men, all of it was all new takes. It was great. I loved it.
Yeah, I was kind of weird when it came to the Ultimate Universe. I wasn't against it, but I wasn't fully behind it either. For whatever reason, for some reason, it just did not sit right with me. It's like, why are you doing a whole alternate universe?
Well, I do know why. It was because at the time, Marvel was trying to do a couple of things. They were trying to essentially revitalize themselves. Joe had just taken over running the company, like fully running the company, after the success of his Marvel Knights stuff, and so he's the numbers on all of your major books were not great. Outside of X-Men and Uncanny X-Men, nothing else was selling. Even ASM wasn't selling.
Was it just because Spidey wasn't good at that time, or just interest was down?
Spidey wasn't very good. Interest was down. Now, very shortly after, he did get J. Michael Straczynski to come over. And there was still a lot of that like post-Onslaught, post-Heroes Reborn hangover.
Yeah, Onslaught, I went back and reread that again recently. I was like, oh, yeah, this wasn't good.
I didn't think Onslaught was bad. The problem was that titles like Amazing Spider-Man and Incredible Hulk that weren't actually affected by Onslaught should never have rebooted.
I kind of wonder if that should have been just an X book event and not a full Marvel Universe event.
I think so. In a lot of excuse me. In a lot of ways, it should have been. Now, granted, the I guess climax of the series, like the figuring out how to beat Onslaught, wouldn't have worked.
Right.
You would have had to go and figure out some other weakness for him. If it would have just stayed a X-Men centric event. And I can kind of understand it because, if you do look back, all the main titles, Avengers had all that shit with Teen Tony. Iron Man was a fucking mess.
Yeah.
Thor was pretty much, I think that was around the time you had like death metal Thor with the belly shirt and the hair down to his ankles and the chains wrapped around him and all kinds of crazy shit. He didn't even resemble Thor anymore. He resembled somebody that should have been on the cover of an Iron Maiden album.
Right.
And then I think Cap was still dying or something, and he was running around in that where he looked like NFL Super Pro. So it was, you had a lot of holes to dig yourself out of, and Onslaught was a good restart, but it did have all that hangover. Now, had the Heroes Reborn stuff with Jim and Rob coming in and taking over half of it, if that would have been a bigger success, if it could have kept the momentum, and I think if it wouldn't have turned into such a like backstage politics train wreck, it could have, and you wouldn't have had that like 1998 collapse.
Yeah.
And then you wouldn't have had Marvel Knights.
Right.
You wouldn't have had Joe coming in. You wouldn't have him taking over the company, and you wouldn't have had him start the Ultimate line. And the Ultimate line was an attempt to restart, like get new readers. It was their first real hardcore attempt since the early 90s. And since they left the newsstand, mostly left the newsstand.
Yeah, they were still doing a little bit at that point.
Yeah, they were. And that was around the time that they tried to do, like, they had a deal with Target and I think Toys R Us, where they had comics in both of those locations.
Right.
One of the 300 examples on why going into big box retailers is not the solution. But so they were going for this whole new thing, and basically the hook behind it was it's all the characters you recognize, but you don't need. At that time, it would have been about 45, almost 50 years. Or actually, no, it would have been about 40 years.
Yeah.
40 years of continuity that you don't have to know.
Right. You can come in and pretty much do whatever. And
yeah,
since it's a new universe, it'll stick.
Exactly. You can come in, you can do something new, and you could get a chance to like restamp these characters for the 21st century, not leave Peter perpetually 27, like somewhere between 25 and 30, because Peter should be about 30 right now. At that time, he would have been about 27. So you didn't have to deal with that. You didn't have to deal with a marriage that they hadn't yet destroyed.
Right. One More Day didn't happen.
Yeah, it hadn't happened yet. You didn't have to deal with, I remember watching the X-Men cartoon, and this stuff is different than what's going on in this other book here. So which one's right?
Yeah.
You get to start from the beginning. And this was the big thing. Back then, they had almost no collections. All those trade paperbacks that you can go into Barnes & Noble now or go onto Amazon and, buy that are out there now, where you could basically read from almost 1963 through almost present, that
Yeah.
whole program didn't exist yet.
Yeah, trade paperbacks were very
Rare.
limited at the time. It was usually like a specific story arc.
Yes, it was a specific story arc. You'd have, Days of Future Past.
Right.
You
Or
would
like one of the
have-
ones that I had was the X-Men versus the Asgardians.
Yes, Asgardian War. That was from all those annuals the one year.
Yeah. Was it all annuals?
It was.
Because there's also the X-Men versus Alpha Flight too, I believe.
Yeah, that was from the 2-part X-Men Alpha Flight.
They had that in it.
Prestige.
Then it had the 2 annuals.
Yeah. And so you had a couple of annuals and a couple of prestige books that were released around the same time that would be bundled into a collection. Because back then, and one of the big reasons why is since trades were so rare, and creators that were working on them, the residuals they got were absurd.
Absurd in a good way or bad way?
Oh no, in a great way.
Oh, okay.
Like the residuals creators get now are pennies. It's nothing because everything is expected to be collected.
Yeah.
So, but
hence the term writing for the trade or writing for the omnibus.
Exactly. So they make half their money up front and half of it on the back end. Back then, everybody was getting all their pay up front. And if you wrote something goddamn good, really like that everyone loves, that everybody's trying to search down those single issues for, they might collect it, but because you made them so much money on the front end, and now it was enough to create a secondary product out of it without them having to pay you again. Now your back end money was good. It was really good. And you still had a lot of those guys that were currently working for Marvel at the time. So they didn't have, Marvel was very reticent to really, collect a lot of stuff. And even when they started to, they had a lot of, there were some creators, some of your more like kind of middle of the road creators, like a guy like Howard Mackey or I'm talking about that level. I can't speak specifically to Howard Mackey's contract, but like, Tom DeFalco, Howard Mackey, those kind of B, C, D level writers, those guys, it was unexpected for them to get anything collected. So they probably just didn't even address it in their contracts.
Because I remember the first big collections that Marvel did was when they started up the Marvel Masterworks.
Yes.
And most of those people either were Stan Lee, and he was already getting whatever money he was getting.
Yeah.
Kirby, I'm sure they had a specific deal with him.
Or his estate, because, I mean, when did Jack pass? Like 96?
This was pre-96. I'm talking the original run.
Yeah, in like the 80s. In like the late 80s.
The hardbound ones that they were pretty much collecting like issues 1 through 12,
yes,
and then 13 through 24 in the second volume of like X-Men, Avengers, Spider-Man, and Fantastic Four, and I think that was it.
Yeah. And then later they got into like Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor.
Yes. But those are the first big collections. I mean, my uncle owned a comic book store in the early 90s during the big boom period for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And I can remember looking, him giving me a catalog going, yeah, let me know if there's anything you want me to order. Okay. And there was very few trades.
Yeah. They were non-existent. So now, and a lot of them, the rights, some of the rights weren't settled for reprint. So they had a lot of, I guess, issues to deal with. But now you're dealing with basically a whole new start to a universe where people can get in on the ground floor with new continuity. You have all the reprint rights written right into the contract. They planned on collecting it from the minute that they came out with the idea. So there's no hangups there. And because they're all writing essentially for the trade, they went to that decompressed storytelling. Everything was 6 issues, 6 issues, 6 issues, 6 issues.
Right.
And you could put them out like clockwork. And you could, even whenever there was a crossover, it wasn't like one issue of this book and 2 issues of that book. No, it'd be 3 and 3. So you just skip those 3 issues and then release that one as its own trade.
Right.
Like that crossover. And the system that they worked out, yes, it was a lot more like factory kind of assembly line storytelling, but it was successful in drawing in non-readers and bring them in on the ground floor to essentially their own continuity. This is my Spider-Man.
Right.
Which is something they couldn't say about Peter. Not only was there 40 years of ASM, there was...
Then you had Web and Spectacular,
adjectiveless, Web of... there was...
at one point there was like, what, 4 or 5 different Spider-Man books running?
I think at one point they got up to 5. You had Spectacular, you had Amazing. You have Web, you had Sensational.
Oh yeah.
And you had adjectiveless.
Right.
It was pretty nuts.
But then again, even in the 70s, Spider-Man had a number of books, because Web started in the 70s and you still had ASM. And maybe even Spectacular was started in the 70s, but then he was also in all like Marvel 2-in-1. Or was it 2-in-1 or Team Up?
Team Up.
And then you also had Marvel Tales.
Yeah, Marvel Tales, which is a lot of reprints of this stuff. But they had dropped like the Marvel Tales line, the Amazing Adventures line, all those reprint lines that they were coming out that they had in like the 70s that were recollecting the stuff from the 60s for the new direct market readership at the start of the direct market. Those books started going away. And sometimes it would be, well, it's half reprint, half new story, or it'd be, these 14 pages of, issue of, Amazing Spider-Man number 11 plus an 8-issue or an 8-page story on Beast.
Yeah.
A solo adventure.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't Marvel Tales in like the late 80s actually turn into like, they got away from the reprints, and because I could remember half the book being Cloak and Dagger and the other half being the Defenders. And it was like the new Defenders. It was like Doctor Strange, Andromeda, Valkyrie.
Yeah, I don't really remember that series past the.
It didn't last for very long.
No, and you also had other books that they started launching around that time. There was a couple of different anthologies. They had like Marvel Comics Presents, and then that became like, first it was like the.
Let's wait for them to introduce new characters, because didn't they introduce Iron Fist in that?
No, that was in Marvel Premiere.
Premiere, that's it. Okay, Premiere. But that's another one that I think they should have kept going, instead of just giving somebody a whole new book.
Yeah,
throwing them in as a secondary character into another book. Introduce them in, and have a series where you can introduce new characters. Well, it's like, hey, people like this. Okay, what's the next step? Do we put guest star them in another book a little bit? Do we give them their own book? Do we give them a mini series?
Well, Marvel tried doing that again. Actually, they tried bringing that idea, because you had Marvel Spotlight, you had Marvel something else, you had Marvel Premiere. I think you had Astonishing Tales or something.
Tales to Astonish?
No, this was later.
Because I don't think they brought that back.
What was the one that introduced Deathlock? I thought that was Astonishing something or other.
I think that was Astonishing Tales.
Yeah, so Astonishing Tales, which was different from Tales to Astonish.
Yeah, by one word.
I know. But like it was a I don't, there was a handful of them, but regardless, they started they started trying to bring that same recipe back in the early 2000s because they relaunched Amazing Fantasy. I don't know if you remember that, but it didn't get very long. But in the first 6 issues, you got Anya Cortez that became Arana. The current, I think she's the current Spider Girl.
I've lost track of how many spider people there are these days.
Yeah, but she was originally Arana, but she was like a Hispanic spider girl.
Was it supposed to be like the female version of Tarantula?
Well, yeah, she was kind of a mix of both.
Gotcha.
And she wore like the white T-shirt and had like these spider like web gauntlet things. She was a cool design and had like the giant goggles, but her face was still uncovered.
Right.
So she wasn't bad. And then after that, they did the female Scorpion.
Oh, okay, that's new one to me.
That was like a teenage female Scorpion. And then later in the series, that was like issues 7 to 12. Then they did a couple other, I think, one-off issues. Then they introduced Amadeus Cho.
Oh, okay. They introduced him in there, not directly into the Hulk.
Correct. And when he moved over, he didn't move over into Hulk. He moved into when Hercules.
Yeah, he was Hercules' sidekick for a while.
Yeah, and it was whenever Hercules took over the Incredible title. So It went from like after Planet Hulk, I think it went to the Incredible Herc instead of Hulk.
Right.
And the only Hulk book was the adjectiveless Hulk book that was mostly the Red Hulk. And they did like Invincible Hulk or something like that.
And then eventually Immortal Hulk. And
yeah. But that was during the time where everybody was like starting to play musical titles.
Yeah.
And they'd be, suddenly, I think that might have been around the same time that Captain America got retitled back to like whatever the hell his book was titled in the 50s. When he was Captain America Commie Smasher, but it wasn't actually Captain America. Well, it wasn't Steve. Whatever. And then before it went back to Captain America with like issue 100 or 101 or something like that, or 104. And he got his own title again. Might have been Tales of Suspense or something. I honestly can't remember. But then it went to like Tales of Suspense with Bucky and Falcon. And during near like kind of the tail end of the Brubaker run.
Okay.
So they started just changing titles all over the place, and it was weird. In that era, but they did do that. As I said, though, they were doing that same kind of approach by coming up with a title where they'd initially launch a character and then see where they went. I think that was what the plan was for Joe Quesada and Josh Middleton's NYX series.
Mm-hmm.
Because they had planned on it going longer than just the 7 issues it ended up getting.
Right.
Because they were going to introduce other new characters beyond just Laura. Because she didn't even show up until issue 3. And I know that they wanted to introduce more kind of different characters in that title as well. And that was going to be kind of their not really anthology, but not really have much of a regular cast.
Right.
That's what that title was gonna be. But then, Josh Middleton's really, really, really slow at interiors.
Well, you'll have that with some artists. I mean, look, there's a reason why Barry Windsor-Smith got taken off of Conan back in the day.
Yeah, and there's a reason why he would do like 1 issue of X-Men a year.
Yeah. It was always amazing, but there's a reason why he only got 1 a year.
Yeah.
They never gave him regular work. I think after Conan, he didn't get like a regular series after that, did he?
Not at Marvel. The closest thing he got was when he did the 12 issue Wolverine Weapon X in Marvel Comics Presents.
Right.
But then I believe he did when he went to Valiant.
Yeah, he did.
He was one of the guys that Jim took over to Valiant whenever he was starting Valiant.
Some of that old Valiant stuff from the late 80s, early 90s was really good.
Oh yeah, basically anything I think it was pre-Chaos War or something like that. I don't remember what it was. There was some
their equivalent of Crisis on Infinite Earths.
It was basically within the first 2 years. Everything that like they did in the first 2 years, and that's before other creators came on and they became much more commercial.
Yeah.
And they started trying to compete with Marvel. I think that's around the time that Jim left.
And probably around the time Acclaim bought him.
It would have been before Acclaim, but after they got the Dell and Gold Key characters.
Yeah, oh yeah, because when I started reading Valiant, they had Magnus Robot Fighter and Turok and Solar.
Yeah, and so, and it would have been I think it would have been before Exo, or right around the time Exo Man of War got his own solo book.
Yeah, because I remember reading Exo Man of War, Archer and Armstrong, Eternal Warrior. Never really big into Harbinger. I was like, wow, these are knockoff X-Men going on here.
Yeah, they were. But so regardless, they did a lot of interesting stuff. But Barry never really did interiors on a at least not at Marvel or DC after Conan.
Yeah, because he just took way too long.
Well, he got more and more and more detailed too.
Yeah, he did. And evening to you, Real Comic Stacks. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, hey Stacks, what's up, brother?
I mean, because the Barry Windsor Smith Conan stuff is fantastic.
Well, you get there's a there's you go look at somebody like Mark Silvestri.
Mm-hmm.
Silvestri used to be like crazy fast. Now, granted, he's still running his own company at Top Cow.
Right.
But, I mean, at this point, we're waiting how many years for that Mark Silvestri Batman miniseries?
Probably close to a decade, I'd imagine, if not longer.
Yeah. There was, I mean, I know it was announced at least 6 years ago. I'm pretty sure Obama was still in office when they announced that book.
Yeah, I remember hearing something about that. I was like, oh, that could be interesting. So I've, because I always enjoyed Silvestri's art.
Yeah, but so that's a guy that was doing 2 issues a month in the summer months.
Yeah,
when he was the regular, like the monthly artist on Uncanny. Now, granted, he was probably still only doing 12 issues a year, because Rick Leonardi would come in and do a couple issues here.
Right.
Jim Lee would do an issue there. But yeah, he was still the regular. But even when he moved over to Wolverine, when he was on the Wolverine series, he basically did roughly, I think 30 issues in about 24 months. So he was blowing books out, but his style has gotten a lot more detailed. Granted, he doesn't have Dan Green to rely on to make him look even better these days, but he did an amazing job, and he was fast. But a lot of those guys, the more I guess the better that they get, the more detailed they get, and then the slower they get. It's rare to see a guy going into his career like, John Romita Jr., Mark Bagley, Adam Kubert, Andy Kubert, that 30, almost, hell, in the case of John Romita, almost, 42, 43 years into his career, is still able to knock out an issue a month without a problem. Bagley at 30, almost 35 years into his career, could still knock out 18 issues a year. The Kuberts can easily do 12 to 14 issues a year each. It's rare to have that because, I mean, you look at I don't mean to pick on the man, but you look at a guy like Ethan who has, I'm, whether you think his art's great, amazing.
I actually like Ethan Van Sciver's art. I have no complaints with his art. I mean, honestly, some of his art is what dragged me back into DC.
I always thought he was a wooden Todd McFarlane, but that's, yeah. Okay. I mean, no, but I mean, I can get that. But you look at him, his art has, since you look back at his time on, with Morrison on X-Men versus what he's doing now, his art is 100 times more detailed and it takes 100 times longer.
Right.
Now that you can argue the merits of both. Granted, he'll even admit he wasn't that fast even when he was doing X-Men. That's why he left the book, because he couldn't, pick up the slack for Quitely, who was also slow. They needed a third artist on that book. But if you look at the stuff that I see him putting out today, detail wise, it is so much more. And you look at the same with a guy like Jim Lee.
Yeah. Jim's
early stuff when he was back on Punisher, not anywhere near as detailed as he does today. Silvestri. But it's rare to get a guy that doesn't essentially get slower and more detailed, because they take more pride in their craft. They want to do more. They want to be more of the artist rather than letting the inker kind of fill in for them.
Right.
And a lot of times they start inking their own stuff too.
There's that.
Yeah.
I mean, but the funny thing is, you were saying a little earlier about, how many different Spidey people there are, and the multiple Hulks. There was at 1.4 different Hulks, 2 red, 2 green.
Yeah, you had, there was red. Yeah, there was 2. There was a red and a green Hulk and a She-Hulk. Because you had red Hulk, red She-Hulk, green She-Hulk. Plus you had Abomination, and then you had the blue one, which was Rick Jones, which was A-Bomb.
I didn't realize about those two.
Or
at least A-Bomb. I knew about Abomination, but I didn't think he was considered a Hulk.
Yeah, I mean, he's basically the same thing. I mean, he's still he's stile gamma infused, I believe.
Yeah, you're right on that. But it's just, I can remember a while back, me and some of my friends kind of picking on DC a little bit, because it's like, wow, how many variants of the same character do you have? Like, look at all the Flashes, look at all the people in the Bat family, the Captain Marvel family. It's like,
oh god, yeah.
But then Marvel hit that point
with Spider People.
Yeah, almost to a degree that's worse, because in most cases, it is actually, now that I think about it, most cases of DC, they literally are all family.
Yeah, and you look at it, all the Claw people.
Yeah, Wolverine's another one. And how many different variants of Wolverine are there now? At least 3, if not 4, that I know of.
Okay, yeah, you got Wolverine, you got X-23, you got Dawkins, you got Honey Badger or Scout or whatever the fuck, clone of a we all saw multiplicity, so it's I guess the short bus one. Xerox of Xerox does not end well.
No, it doesn't.
Then you got Blonde-Verine, the one from the Ultimate Universe. Yeah. That's still running around somewhere. Plus,
Old Man Logan's still running around too, isn't he?
No, I think they did kill him.
Can't kill Wolverine, can they?
Well, they sent him back to another alternate future where he ended up fighting the Maestro.
Oh.
So it was kind of like a mix of the end of the Old Man Wolverine or the Old Man Logan story that Miller did.
Right.
Plus Peter David's Future Imperfect. Like they ended up in a where the future Hulk in that universe was the Maestro, but
Right.
I don't. But
Yeah, just
Wolverine's Old
but
Man
I
Logan's
mean,
family was still dead. It was confusing.
I like I said, I'll give DC credit because when they do a family, they're either a blood related, or in the case with the Bat family, there's the ties are so close that they could be considered family.
Well, all the Hulk people were the same.
Well,
You
yeah,
know,
it's true because it was Betsy Ross as the Red She-Hulk, and then
yeah,
her dad was the Red
the
Hulk,
Red Hulk.
and then Bruce and Jen.
Bruce and Jen. Rick Jones was also he'd been there since the beginning.
Yeah,
Um, Blonsky had been basically around. He was the
he was one of the first Hulk villains.
yeah, he was the first one that really stuck around. And you had the leader in there at some point, so there's a fourth.
Yeah,
Or well, seventh. So you had like 7 Gamma people. You started with. Now you're at the point of having like 3 or 4 different Captains America.
yeah, if not more.
The only ones that weren't really related in any way are the Spider people.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, you got Ben Reilly and you got Kane, and they're clones. But Miles,
Yeah, no relation to anything.
relation, other universe. Arana, no relation, other universe. They tried to connect Silk via it was the same spider that bit her. Ezekiel's still around somewhere. But then they got into they got J. Michael Straczynski did the same things that Scott Snyder started copying over on Batman years later, where Peter was the avatar of the spider totem and crazy shit like that. Madam Web and Julia Carpenter and
I never minded.
Drew.
She was the one that was in West Coast Avengers, right?
Julia Carpenter, the blonde, yeah.
I didn't mind her as a character.
No, I liked her. I thought she was
at the
best.
time. The Jessica Drew Spider Woman was gone.
Yeah,
when she got introduced, so it wasn't like it was just like, oh, there's another one. No, it's like there's another one again, or there's one again. And Yule, I guess he could be considered moonlighting at this. I would have shot you the link, dude, if I followed you on Twitter. For some reason, I'm not. I'll have to remedy that. But you're welcome to join us if you like. If you do, Doc, if you could shoot him the link.
Oh yeah.
If he wants to join, he's welcome to. If not a big deal. Definitely would love to have him on sometime.
Oh, Yule?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. I did not realize that Yule. I hadn't seen him in the.
Yeah, he just popped. He just said something just a couple minutes ago. Yeah, he's one of the people who actually subbed to me on here, which I appreciate. Everybody who does. And I'm also one of those old school kind of people that I miss when annuals were one shots.
Oh God, yeah. Yes, absolutely, 100%. There needs to be,
case in point, the X-Men versus Dracula.
Yes,
that's a prime example of it. Or when this was in the 90s, I don't remember. I can't try to remember the villain's name, but he fucked with the X-Men in their dreams.
It
was like Hyde or Horde. The one where he Rogue ends up getting turned into Crystal and
oh God, yes. Hold on.
You know who I'm talking about, though.
Yes, I'm trying to remember. It was some obscure villain that you never
really only used that one time.
Yes. Hold on, I got my.
Because I remember getting that at a grocery store as a kid. My mom being pissed off because it was a little bit more than a normal comic book price. Because it was an annual. It was, instead of 75 cents, it was like $1.25 or something.
Yeah. Oh, let's see. Oh. Why does it not have? Because was that the one that had Amanda Sefton in it?
Maybe. It was X-Men Annual 11.
Oh, it was 11.
It's 11. Yeah, I just got brought up a list of the annuals.
Oh, it was Horde.
It was Horde. Okay.
Yes. Yep, it was Horde, and yeah, I honestly, that's one of those. I guess it was kind of fun, annual, but it was strange. I liked, I didn't mind the annuals when they were one shots. I do kind of like them when they did like little events in them, like the Evolutionary War.
Yes, that's the other thing I was going to bring up too. Is I miss when the annuals were either one shots where they could turn around and use a character from another line of books. Like for example, one of the X-Men annuals had Mr. Impossible.
Yeah.
Or the Impossible Man, whatever he was called.
The Impossible Man.
And you didn't need to do that in like the normal monthly books, but just doing that as a one-off, a little bit bigger than normal story.
Yeah. And
really worked.
Yeah, like some of them were really, really good. Like the Days of Future Present event was really good. It was a solid story. And the Asgardian War was another great, story. It felt bigger than a couple issues of the regular series, but it was also still semi self-contained, and you could kind of shove it into continuity wherever you want.
Right.
But then you'd have other ones, like especially in the early 90s when you got to some of the events like the Kings of Pain event or the Shatter Shot event. Those were just kind of dumb. And then whenever they basically in like the mid 90s, when they got away from even numbering them as annuals and just started giving them the year.
Yeah.
That's when it was basically just another double-sized issue.
Right.
In the continuity, like in the storyline of whatever the hell else is going on. Like if you skip the annual, you're fucked because you missed part 2 and 3.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of whatever story you're reading. But yeah, so they needed to either have it as an event or completely self-contained one shot. And they got away from that. Honestly, at this point, annuals are completely skippable, and they're basically only used for giving work to people that don't otherwise deserve work.
Yeah, I mean, because I can remember too when I was, being a kid, that everybody loved those summer annual events.
Yeah,
because you knew what books you had to buy. You knew how many you had to buy, so you could plan out the cost.
Yeah.
And I don't think they dropped them all in 1 month either.
No, they didn't. The annuals came out. Actually, I think they did. But the thing was, they were often like 5th week events. In a month that had 5 Wednesdays. Because they tried to keep the overall publishing, and they do like half of the titles in the first 5th week and half of the titles in the second 5th week, because you generally only get 2 5th weeks a year.
Right.
Sometimes you might get 3, in which case, well, fuck, we're all screwed. But they tried to keep, like ASM came out the first Wednesday or first Tuesday of every month, or Tuesday for newsstand, Wednesday for direct.
Right.
X-Men was the 3rd week. So when you get into 5th weeks, that's when they'd release an annual. They could double you up on whatever title you were reading that month, but they didn't have to screw with the regular schedule. You just slotted in stuff that only was published that like once a year.
Right.
That's what an annual goes for.
I can also remember too in the late 60s, early 70s from stuff I've since read. I wasn't alive for this, but like when they did giant size issues.
Yeah. Well, giant sizes were basically the predecessor to annuals.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. But they also had tended to tie into whatever was going on. It was usually the blow off for the story that they were doing. Like there's the ones I remember, for example, are like the giant size Avengers.
Well, there was a few years where they did annuals, like 1970, 71. They did, like, X-Men had their annuals.
Mm-hmm.
They had them only in 70 and 71. They didn't have annual number 3, didn't come out until 1979. And what they did was annual 1 was basically reprints of a few issues. And they actually called it the King Size Special.
The first two were, the 70 and 71. Yeah, I'm looking at that right now.
Then number 3 became King Size Annual.
Yep. And then it just became annual after that.
And then
it was King Size Annual all the way up until number 7, which was 83.
Yep. So they, like, a lot of them were for, like, Avengers, their king size or their giant size books. Marvel tried doing some annuals early, and some of them got, like, they stuck with it. Like, it just stayed successful. Like, I think Amazing Spider-Man. But then some of them, like, annuals weren't selling, so they took a couple of years off and started calling it the giant size. And now, like, giant sized X-Men number 1 would have essentially been annual number 3.
Yeah. Okay.
Same with giant size number 2, annual number 4. But then they came back to the king size and then added just annuals. Like, they did king size, then they tried giant size, and then they just said, well, we'll count all of them and then we'll go to annuals. But they only kept the king size in the count. It was weird. I don't know what their logic was. And I guess maybe with X-Men, because it was so different for giant size number 1 and number 2, that they decided against it, because giant size number 1 was 75, and giant size number 2 was, I think, 76.
Yeah. I didn't even really realize that they did a giant size too.
Oh yeah, they did. Giant size number 2 was, let's see. It was also 1975.
Oh, so it's probably like every 6 months.
Yeah, I think it was it was going to be a quarterly book, but it wasn't really successful as a quarterly, but it did revitalize interest in the title.
Yeah.
Because then years later, like literally like decades later, 30 years actually, they did giant size number 3 in 2005. Joss Whedon did it. And then they did giant size number 4 also in 2005. Like, one was April, or one was May, one was August. So they were going to go back. I guess they figured they'd fix it. I don't know what their logic was. Whedon did number 3, Claremont did number 4. I mean, I guess they needed to give Claremont a giant sized X-Men issue, because
it would make
he never had one.
Oh, that's right. He wasn't on the first one.
Nope. Len Wein wrote the first one. Roy Thomas wrote the second one. So, yeah, I guess they were just like, okay, well,
it's always funny when people talk Claremont. They always bring up John Byrne, but they tend to leave out, like, both Wein and Cockrum.
Well, I mean, Len was a great editor for Chris, but he didn't, and he gave Chris kind of the pieces to start with.
Right.
And it was kind of like Len didn't want to write that book. He did not want to write X-Men regularly. That's why, I think Chris might have been like his assistant at the time. And basically he begged for it. I don't know. Did you ever watch, it was on Amazon Prime. There's a Claremont documentary on there. It has him, Annie Nesenti, and Louise Simonson. Basically just talking about like Claremont on the X-Men. And it was basically talking about his entire time from the time he got the book.
I'm gonna have to look into that.
And it's a good documentary. It's kind of fun. Chris's humor was really amusing, and it's kind of a good insight into how important Louise and Annie were for him, especially considering how much he hates Jim Shooter.
Yeah, there's that.
They all hated Jim Shooter, but Shooter made them so much better by being so demanding of them. But yeah, Chris would talk about how he'd be working on something and he'd be getting close to the end of like a big story and he'd be like, I don't know what the fuck I'm supposed to do next. I'm out of ideas. And this is like 6 years into his run. And Annie or Wheezy would be like, Chris, remember this thing you started hinting at like 4 years ago?
Yeah, there was a lot of that in that X-Men run of like him dropping something in
and then
one
not
issue,
picking it up for 4 years.
Yeah.
When he picked that up again, it's because he was out of other ideas. That's the amusing thing. And all of those things ended up leaving it just sitting there, let it percolate in the background and made him look, honestly, I think it made him look like a better writer than he really was.
Right.
Because he'd be like, oh yeah, I'm going to pick up this thing. But it wasn't so far back that it seems like, oh, you're reaching, dude.
Mm-hmm.
But it was also recent enough that people would be like, oh wow, I almost forgot about that, because it would just be at the edge of people's memories.
Whereas at the time you had DC who would reach for it. They'd have like a one-off villain, and then all of a sudden all this bad shit's happening 10 years later, and it turns out it's this nondescript fucking
this
jabroni that
villain.
Green Lantern slapped around in an issue 15 years ago.
Exactly. They seem to, Chris Claremont's X-Men. Yeah, it's such a good documentary.
I'll have to look into that.
I think it's still on Amazon. It was on Prime. So if you got Prime, you should be able to watch it.
I'll track it down.
It's about 80 minutes, and it's really informative. Because Chris was so unique in that he wrote the book in a different style than anyone else was writing. I think you could see that in the overall success of it. Avengers was a good book. Fantastic Four was a good book.
Yeah, but it's like what we were talking about before we started. It's like, out of all the books outside, all the team books outside of Fantastic Four, the X-Men felt the most as a family.
And honestly, at times it felt more like a family because it was bigger.
And you even had some of their major villains during this run were related to characters in the X-Men, in Black Tom Cassidy with Banshee and Juggernaut with Xavier.
But not so many of them that it made the universe feel small.
Right. It was just those two, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah. I mean, yes, you had the connections between like Eric and Charles from, way back when that Chris really explored, and Moira and Legion and, but once you started getting into some of the later stuff where they kept trying to tie everyone together, that's when it starts getting like, it makes the universe feel small.
Yeah.
But Chris managed to master this. You know what, Stax, you're right. That's the perfect way to describe it. The broken and dysfunctional family dynamic. It was Fantastic Four, while it was a family dynamic, it felt like a more wholesome family.
Because the X-Men
And
were a bunch of misfits all brought together for a common cause.
not only that, but they felt more like a Gen X family, like where it's kind of broken, a little bit kind of duct taped and super glued together. There was a lot of, people would have conflicts and fights. Some people would just kind of vanish for a while and then like kind of wander in and out of your life. Nobody knew where the kids were.
Right.
It was like the perfect commentary on like Gen X mishmashed families, like like the world's most dysfunctional Brady Bunch.
With super abilities.
Yeah, with superpowers. I mean, imagine if Jan got hit in the face with the Beast throwing that football.
Yeah.
And then tried to
or the football was the Beast being thrown by Colossus.
Yes, exactly. And then got pissed off and decided to try and mind wipe people because you broke her nose. It was a little more real. It felt a little more like the families that we, maybe not our direct families, but we all had a family of like a friend with a family like that.
Yeah. I mean, and the funny thing too is, it's, you say you don't want the universe to feel too small by everything, connected, but at the same time, the whole X-Men universe within Marvel was kind of self-contained at this point. And if like you had an X-Men character show up in another book, like say Juggernaut was going to be the villain in a Spider-Man book, you saw noted they made a comment on the cover about, they made a big deal out of Juggernaut being in the book, whether it was in an event or just a one-off.
Yeah. And on the rare occasions where like Doom would end up in an X-Men book.
Right.
It felt like a big deal. Or Dracula. They would touch on little connections to the rest of the universe, but it was, I didn't want to give you my number. You don't have my phone number. Yeah, I could probably, we kind of know each other in passing.
Yeah.
But it's like all of comic superheroes are this elitist, members only version of Facebook at this point, where everyone is friends with everybody.
Yeah.
And that makes the universe feel small and unrelatable. And that's kind of the reason why I was never really drawn to DC. DC always had that feel where the people, like the regular people, didn't really matter so much.
Right.
Whereas most of the Marvel characters, they stayed separate. They didn't hang out together. Nobody knew each other's names.
Yeah. They didn't get together for a barbecue on the 4th of July.
Yeah. Not everybody knew to call Daredevil if they needed a lawyer.
I mean, I think the thing with the DC thing is they started all that back when comic books as a whole or entertainment as a whole was just more wholesome. When they started doing those Thanksgiving crossover events between the JSA and the JLA.
Yeah. Not only was it more wholesome, but it was also more disposable, and continuity didn't matter as much. Yeah,
it was a holiday book, not so much part of continuity. It's like, oh, here's what the JLA did for Thanksgiving. You can fit it into the continuity and it's cool, but it doesn't hurt the continuity if you don't.
And if it doesn't, fuck it, it's Earth 7342A.
Yeah.
And they could just do that whenever they wanted. Whereas Marvel kept their characters a little more separate. They all existed. And if the Hulk wandered across, a fight between Magneto or like the Brotherhood and the X-Men, it was a big deal, and shit just got really sideways.
Yeah, well, that happens when the Hulk shows up.
I know, but or even like Daredevil wanders through and decides to arrest Kitty Pryde because she's fighting against the Freedom Force, who, even though they're villains, are employee
by the
or
government.
employees of the government. And he is an officer of the court.
I still think back to as a kid, like, because thinking about how crossovers like this, that when they actually meant something. I remember my two favorite episodes of Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, oddly enough, his two Amazing Friends were both fucking X-Men characters.
Well,
Firestar and Iceman.
Iceman, yes. Although
she was X-Men related. She wasn't an X-Men at that. Yeah.
But she mostly was. Actually, she wasn't even in the comics.
No, I think she was. I wouldn't be surprised if she was created for the show initially.
Pretty sure she was created for the show because it was another case of them not wanting to use the Human Torch.
Right.
And then when they did put her into the comics, they stuck her in New Warriors.
Wasn't she up in the school the Hellions are from?
She was in the Massachusetts Academy.
Yeah.
For like 2 issues, and then she ended up part of the New Warriors.
Right, okay.
Because like Emma basically fucking ran her off in the first couple, one of her first appearances. And then she went and joined the New Warriors.
But my two favorite episodes of that show were the two that actually had the X-Men in it.
Oh, it's been so long. I barely even remember.
My memory's strange about shit like that for some reason or another, but it is what it is. But I just remember those two being like my favorite. At the time, I wasn't really into the X-Men when that show was airing. I think the only X-Men book I had bought at the time, and it was during the Claremont run, but it was Storm Without Powers. It had Storm, Cyclops, and oh crap, I'm blanking on his name. Scott's dad.
Oh,
Corsair.
Chris. Yeah. I think that would have been X-Men 201.
It's where the mansion gets destroyed by those Shi'ar hunters. Those spider-looking things.
Yeah, was that the issue where they fought each other for who was going to run the team?
I think it was right after that one.
Okay, then that might have been like issue 202 or 203.
And I remember reading this as a kid going, what the hell's going on? I don't understand any of this.
Yeah, it was, like I jumped into X-Men at like issue 222.
Okay.
The X-Men are in the, I don't know, they haven't yet ended up in the Outback, but they're still outlaws.
Right.
The mansion, I think, is destroyed. There's not really a team. Wolverine.
And this is after Mutant Massacre.
No, this is before Mutant Massacre.
Oh, before. Okay.
No. It would have been after the Mutant Massacre, before Fall of the Mutants.
Yes.
And Storm's off doing her own thing, left Wolverine in charge, who basically hands Rogue leadership like 3 weeks after she joined the team, after being a villain.
That whole stretch of the X-Men was just like, holy shit, one bad thing after the other.
Yeah, and it was. And that was the issue with Wolverine versus Sabretooth.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started reading backwards from there. And it's right before the Fall of the Mutants. Then I read through the entire time that they're running around in the Outback. Everybody thinks they're dead. They're, living in some Australian outback town that's got weird technology underground.
Thanks to the Reavers.
And Madeline's slowly going crazy. And, I had to figure this shit out.
Mm-hmm.
I wish there was a Wikipedia.
Yeah, that stretch of the X-Men, if you weren't reading monthly and you just picked up a couple random books, you'd be like, wait, what?
And so much happened from month to month to month and issue to issue, because sometimes it was week to week because they were doing 2 weeks.
All 3 of the mutant books at that time were like that, though.
Yeah, that was because that was around the time that they launched X Factor.
Yep.
New Mutants was already...
They were already going because they had, you know, because they had Cypher getting killed in their, but no, that was Fall of the Mutants. They weren't part of Mutant Massacre.
No, they weren't.
They were there, but I don't know if they had their own book or not yet.
Yeah, no, they had their own book, because they started before X Factor.
Yes,
Far as
because they had that initial Marvel graphic novel.
Yeah, and this would have been around issue 50 for New Mutants.
Okay.
So they were doing all the crazy shit with magic and
it was all leading into Inferno.
Yeah. And now they did have they did actually cross into Fall of the Mutants, but not in the main title. They just had, it'd be like Thor. Thor had a couple issues that were tied into that too.
Yeah.
No, that was Mutant Massacre he was tied into.
No, the New Mutants definitely had a story arc in Fall of the Mutants because that's where Cypher gets killed.
Yeah. That was around issue 55 or so.
Whether they were, I don't know what they had going on in Mutant Massacre, and it was in between Mutant Massacre and Fall of the Mutants was when Inferno happened.
Yeah. No, wait, no. Cypher dies in
Fall of Mutants.
Oh, yeah, you're right. He dies in Fall of the Mutants.
Because that was a big deal at the time.
Yeah, Warlock dies in Extinction Agenda.
Yeah. Both of which were considered pretty major impacts.
Yes, exactly. And so, yeah, you got... Oh, God, yeah.
Because you have all, you have Fall of the Mutants, Mutant Massacre, and this is not in chronological order. Inferno, all happening within, 2.5 years?
Actually, it was about 3 years because they were like each summer. And it was like a trilogy. It was kind of like in the late 2000s where they did the Messiah trilogy.
Right.
For the X-Men with Messiah Complex, Messiah War, and
the only one that tied into
Chosen?
the major Marvel universe as a whole was Inferno. Both Fall of the Mutants and Mutant Massacre only took place for the most part outside those couple of Thor issues.
Yeah.
They were only in the mutant books.
Yeah, and I think that was just because Louise and Walt were like, no, we want to play too. Because Wheezy was the editor over on the X books, but the writer on Thor.
Right.
With Walt. So.
But all those, especially Fall of the Mutants and Mutant Massacre, were so impactful in a number of ways. You had Angel becoming Death, starting in Fall of the Mutant Massacre. So that took a good couple years before, he got reintroduced back as Death via Apocalypse in X Factor, and that was X Factor 12?
15.
Okay.
And then I think it was issue 24 that he shows back up as Archangel.
Right.
So, yeah, you had Fall of the Mutants, Mutant Massacre, and then Inferno. Inferno was a little bit later, though. They gave it a little bit of...
it was before Fall of the Mutants because Archangel wasn't in it at all. Neither was He Is Death. Actually, then again, Apocalypse doesn't show up at all in that story arc, which is probably for the better.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think it went Mutant Massacre, Inferno, Fall of the Mutants.
No, because Inferno happens after Fall of the Mutants because Maddie goes crazy.
Oh, you're right. That's right. You're right. You're right on that. I forgot about that part. Yeah. The Nastier and fucking Sim.
Yeah.
Or fucking with her through the computer.
Yes.
Because they'd gone techno-organic at that point.
Exactly. No, X Factor actually just doesn't even connect. They were doing Judgment War.
Yeah.
I think at the time that everybody else is doing Inferno.
No, they had a bit in Inferno.
Oh no, yeah, you're right. It was a couple issues earlier.
Because they also had the mutant kids that were
yes,
the exterminators. It's like, why would you name a bunch of teenage kids whose powers
Exterminators.
really aren't exterminating much of anything?
Yeah. And
I mean,
it was like Artie and Leech.
Artie, Leech, Boom Boom, and someone else.
Well, they had done a couple of them. I think.
And Richter was there too.
Yeah, because
okay, yes, Richter and Boom Boom both, as time's gone on, have gotten insanely powerful. But at that point, that's not how they were written.
Yeah, because you had around that time you had Fallen Angels that came out,
Mm-hmm.
and you had Exterminators, and both of those they were really designed to kind of refill the ranks and of New Mutants. Because a lot of those characters, Rusty, Skids, Richter, Boom Boom, all came out of those other series to end up as regulars in New Mutants when they hadn't been previously.
Right.
And because they were kind of losing members, Karma kind of went off and did her own thing.
Cypher and Warlock were both. Cypher was dead. Warlock was gone at that point, but he wasn't dead because Extinction Agenda happened after.
A couple of years later.
Yeah.
All you really had left of that original team, because Magic was gone.
Magic was gone. Magma was gone. Yeah. So they had
Annie Moonstone.
She was still there. Cannonball was there. Sunspot was there. And Wolfsbane. And that was it.
And then even then Karma left.
Yep.
And wasn't there much longer. So now you just had Cannonball, Sunspot, Wolfsbane. And Warlock in and out of the book. So you ended up having to add, Rusty, Skids,
Boom,
Richter. And then shortly after is when they introduced Cable.
Right.
Then they introduced Cable right before, like 6 months before Extinction Agenda, which takes out Warlock.
Yep.
Removes takes Wolfsbane out of the book because she ends up just staying in Genosha.
Yep.
And then it doesn't appear again until X Factor with Peter David. Then so now then you add Warpath, Feral, Shatterstar.
Yeah, that had been
Cable, Domino.
Hence the beginning of X-Force.
And now it evolves into X-Force. So yeah, that was kind of a combination of New Mutant stuff, Fallen Angel stuff, Exterminator stuff, and back to more New Mutant stuff, like New Mutants. And by that point, you have like 4 different generations all on one team. And that was why it was time to evolve that book.
Yeah. The original concept of what they wanted the New Mutants to be couldn't exist with where the X-Men were at that point.
Oh, no. Especially since Charles was back now.
Again.
He was back again. But the school was rebuilt.
Yeah.
They weren't operating out of just the bunker underneath. Because remember, for those last couple of years, they were basically just running out of a bunker underground that was the danger room, some showers, some bunks, and the like armory and the launch, like engineering room for the plane. Everything that was above ground, all the dormitories, all the schools, that was gone.
Yeah. And the mansion's been destroyed, 2-3 times now?
Oh, well, that was the second or third time it had been destroyed. And then it became a joke.
Yeah, because the first time is the issue I was talking about earlier, where those Shi'ar hunters wipe it out. Because I remember Cyclops being sentimental about something that didn't involve one of his wives.
Yes, and leaving one of them for another clone of them.
Yeah, it was post Jean Grey, but I think before Madeline Pryor.
Yeah, I'm trying.
Because I think at that point is when he kind of, because it was that, like you were saying, it was the fight between him and Storm to be who would be leader, and she beats him, and he's like, fair fight. I'm a man of my word. You're the leader, but I'm not going to be on the team.
Yeah,
and that's when he ends up meeting Madeline.
Yeah, because he sticks around for he's not really sticking around because he ended up with, was it Candy Southern that he was running around with?
No, because I believe Angel was still hooked up with her even after he got his wings ripped off.
Who was the blonde he was sailing with?
Yeah, can't remember because she was not consequential.
Yeah, it was right around issue 150. 150, 160, something like that. And then trying to figure out what issue it was that Storm lost her powers. Was that issue 180? It might have been, or 185. Yeah, I think it was issue 185 where Storm loses her powers. And then that was, I think, the first time the mansion gets destroyed, and then they end up rebuilding it. Very at the end of the same issue. Around that time, it was,
or one or two issues later, because the X-Men were actually, I think they were actually, weren't they out in space dealing with the Brood?
Yeah, I think
when that happened,
it could have been, because that's when Storm. There was the story with Storm getting eaten by the giant space whale, where she got, and that kind of gave her powers back. Oh God, I'm trying to remember what that is.
Because if I remember correctly, neither Storm nor Cyclops were part of that little space adventure where they had to deal with the Brood.
Yeah, but wasn't that the issue? Wasn't that the story where Lockheed first showed up? I think it was. I think it was.
You might be right on that.
Yeah, I think that's. So
no, then that would be way earlier of the mansion being destroyed. I would say that's not the same time, part of the storyline then.
Yeah, I'm trying. God damn, I got to reread some of this stuff. Let's see. Okay, Rogue joined in issue 171.
Okay.
That was after Storm had lost her powers. And okay, yeah, the death of the Brood Queen and the first appearance of Lockheed were issue 166.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, Storm and everybody else got infected. Storm ends up inside some giant space whale. It burns out the Brood infection and makes her ultra powered and is able to do lightning in space that kills the Brood Queen. But then they come back to Earth. The 167 has the Brood on Earth, And I think that's the issue where everything gets destroyed, because the Starjammers are with them when they come back to Earth, and they only stick around. So it might have been like issue 167 or 168.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, because it was the Sidri.
It was the Sidri that did it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That the Sidri is in 168. And yeah, I think 168's where the mansion gets destroyed.
That I've just looked at what 168 is. That was not the cover that I remember.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was an all green cover. You could see. Um,
178. That was Storm against the Brotherhood, when they're they're trying to save Colossus. 'Dire Wraiths, no. Oh God, I'm blanking at this point, dude.
I'm going through a database right now of covers, just kind of because I'll know the cover if I see it.
Because they destroy the mansion and rebuild it, and then they destroy it again. Right before the X-Men end up needing to kind of go on the run, but before Fall of the Mutants.
Yeah, it could also again. It could also be my memory just shitting the bed on me.
Yeah, because all of the team finally, because then Storm leaves after she's depowered, goes to find Wolverine, ends up having to fight Stonewall and that Silver Saber.
It was issue 154.
Oh, 154 is what you're thinking?
That's the first X-Men book that I had ever bought.
Okay.
And that mansion does get destroyed by the Sidri in that issue.
Oh, yeah. And then they don't. Okay, that's the issue. They destroy it. In 167 is where Kitty just finds a nest underneath, but the Sidri don't destroy the mansion that time.
Right. Yeah, and that's the first appearance of Lockheed. He comes along and destroys the nest.
Yeah. So you end up, let's see. So it gets rebuilt right after that, after issue 154, gets destroyed again around issue 230. Then it doesn't get rebuilt again until issue 290.
Yeah, it is a while because then they're out in Australia for a while, and
then they come back. Then they go to Genosha. Then they for Extinction Agenda. It's not there. The mansion's still not rebuilt. Extinction Agenda. They come back from Genosha. They immediately end up in Shi'ar space again with Lila Cheney. They come back with real Xavier. And then they end up going to Muir Isle, where Scott Lobdell and Tom DeFalco or Bob Harris basically undermine 15 years of Claremont planning to, or I'm sorry, Fabian and Bob Harris undermine 15 years of setup for the Mutant War, and kill all of the underlying conflict between Xavier and the Shadow King, before it, just basically kind of kill it in the womb right before it's about to really all pop off.
So Claremont had a big plan for that.
Oh yeah, he did. He's talked about it a number of times. He had been setting up the Shadow King in the background like every 10 issues. That's why Moira was going kind of weird. That's and like evil. That's why Legion got kind of possessed by him. The Shadow King was trying to track down Storm whenever she was in Cairo, Illinois, when she was, turned into a baby, like a teenager again.
Right.
Or a kid rather. Because he was trying to recruit her. That's why Polaris had been, first she was Malice for a while, and then her powers started making her like basically Girl Hulk. There were the Muir Isle X-Men team was kind of getting corrupted.
Yeah, it was like multiple men. And,
yep.
Yeah.
Banshee was going to end up corrupted. Beast. There was a couple others that were kind of working out of Muir Isle at the time. Forge was, I don't remember if he was going to be part of that or not. He had been part of the, Muir Isle X-Men, but not completely. But that he was setting it up, and it was going to end up as a big conflict. And I believe the planned story was going to end up with essentially the Xavier side with Xavier, Wolverine. I think Jean was going to end up with Wolverine. Oh no, Xavier was going to be dead permanently. Magneto was going to end up running the whole school permanently. There was going to end up being a schism, essentially, and the Summers and Gray clan were all going to side with Magneto.
Right.
So you would have ended up with Havoc, Polaris, Cyclops, Jean, Cable, Rachel, and a couple others that would have all ended up as basically the evil X-Men. And under partial control by the Shadow King, like the remnants of control from him, even though he'd be dead too. But coming under Magneto's kind of tutelage and following Magneto's dream, and then a handful of the rest of them going the other way. So it would have been, I think, Wolverine, Beast, Iceman,
Probably
Archangel, Colossus, Forge. I know Polaris was supposed to end up on this team. Storm, Jubilee, I think one more. They were all supposed to end up on this team. There was 2 pieces of promo art that have been since reused on some of that Jim Lee did. The one that had a team with like Magneto's helmet in the background. I think it was reused for one of the X-Men omnibuses. And the other one that had Havoc in the middle with his arms up, kind of making the X, and Wolverine down in the front, and they're on like kind of like a deserted like dirt plain. Both of those were supposed to be promo pieces for the kind of post Mutant Wars X-Men. But Bob Harris grabbed Fabian Nicieza because Chris basically said, you know what, fuck it. Finish his story however the hell you want. And he said, you got one issue. So they did two. That's why Chris didn't write issue 280. Fabian did. Off of, now granted, it was off of Chris's like kind of plot notes, but that's why Chris didn't write issue 280. And then he didn't do any more issues of Uncanny after that. He did X-Men 1 through 3, and then he was done there. Byrne actually took over X-Men at 281. And then, or Uncanny at 281. And then when Chris quit X-Men after issue 3, Byrne took over writing that. Granted, I think he only lasted about 3 issues on that before he told Bob Harris to go fuck himself and walked out. That's kind of how you ended up with Fabian and Scott Lobdell. Because my memory is correct. Yeah, Scott Lobdell was basically just walking down the hall. And they needed somebody because Byrne had quit. He quit Uncanny and he quit Adjectiveless at the same time. I believe that might have been the last stuff he ever did at Marvel. It would have been no, he did stuff after that. Because that was 92. Huh.
Yes, when you have 50 plus years of continuity and writers changing, artists changing, it definitely becomes a little challenging trying to making sure you remember what happens when and in what order. And
yeah, without actually referencing things, sometimes I sit there and go, wait, and when did that happen? Oh yeah, it looks like Byrne only did 2 issues of X-Men of Adjectiveless. He did issue 4 and 5. So John Byrne actually created Omega Red.
Who is an absolutely worthless 90s character, in my opinion.
Yeah, for the most part. The only... I did like what Remender did with him in Uncanny X-Force, but at the same time, making an entire family of Omegas.
Yeah.
Was, I thought, kind of stupid. But it was the same thing. Once again, it was Marvel making their universe smaller by connecting the Weapons Plus program to the Super Soldier program and the Omega program over in Russia to the Red Room program.
Right.
That, so it made it all smaller. I understand, like, oh, cute, especially like military programs. They often are kind of offshoots of other programs.
Right.
But at the same time, it makes it feel smaller instead of having a rogue, experimental division over here doing something and another one doing over here. And sometimes they're doing the same things without anybody realizing because the government is so big that it doesn't talk to itself.
Right.
That's a little more realistic in my opinion. But whatever.
Well, I mean, how many stories did we see in the 70s and 80s of something going wrong at S.H.I.E.L.D.?
Oh, God, yeah.
And it got so bad because, things got so compromised, or, one hand didn't talk to the other and they had no idea what was going on.
Oh yeah, none of them ever had a goddamn clue what was going on. I know that Steranko tried to kind of keep that stuff together, but even that didn't really work out so well.
I mean, comics continuity as a whole is just messy.
Oh God, yeah.
And it doesn't matter which book or company. It just doesn't matter. You've been around for that long.
Oh yeah, you do. You're around for that long. You're publishing that many books every month.
Good luck making sense of JLA continuity without factoring in reboots.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, shit. I know that people sit there and get like you get into the X-Men, start adding fucking time travel and alternate future children, and then going back in time and changing shit. Holy hell!
Yeah,
I mean, it's just a train wreck.
And I don't personally feel that rebooting is always the best way to go. Sometimes it's like, okay, those plot threads that are there, you doing anything with them? No, let them stay there.
Yeah.
Just, if you don't have a plan for it right now, just forget about it. Just let it die.
Now, my problem is with, and especially in the last 15 years, about 10 to 15 years of X-Men, is the same problem I have with most of Marvel these days. Everything is too close. And the problem is you've established so many close relationships between all the heroes. You can't undo that.
Yeah.
That's when you're there's certain, when you've written yourself into a certain corners, you can't write your way out of it without a worldwide mind wipe that somebody's going to want to undo in 3 months.
Yeah, or anywhere from 3 months to a year is going to get undone.
Yeah, or you have to do a retcon. I'm talking like a massive reset or reboot,
like New 52 was.
Yeah, and now I've always said that I have the perfect solution to Marvel. You have an issue of Fantastic Four that ends with Franklin Richards waking up from like the Skrull, Shi'ar, flying squirrel, monkey, bird flu. And you find out everything since right before Civil War I was essentially he hallucinated it.
It was a fever dream.
And he hallucinated it, but also manifested it into reality. Once his fever breaks, he realizes that it was a nightmare. The world resets, but some people remember that. Some people don't. Most people don't. Some people want you set up a massive amount of storytelling possibilities with heroes becoming villains, villains becoming heroes, alliances shifting, because now some of the people that remember it want to make that reality real. Some people that want to prevent that reality from ever coming to be.
Right.
And so you end up with you open a lot of new doors, but you also unfuck things that are essentially completely fucked and currently unfuckable.
Yeah.
You can't.
That is actually a good idea. I mean, I wasn't a big fan of New 52, and one of the things that, at least the people I know that complained about it, was one of the things they liked about DC was the characters were more familiar with each other.
Yeah.
And New 52 wiped that all out, and in some cases, complete personality shifts to characters.
Yeah, and this would essentially just reset it back to,
like you said, just before the first Civil War.
Just before first Civil War. Because, and he can explain it with, oh my God, I can't believe that I had,
is this what my nightmares are made of?
Yeah, like I didn't. What is my real opinion of Tony Stark? Holy shit, he went fucking evil. And he went Machiavellian in order to create this, and now it sets up a conflict between Franklin trying to talk his parents into taking Tony seriously as a threat. He's gonna, obviously Franklin remembers most of this. Nobody remembers everything. Most people remember nothing. It feels like everything just reset, but they don't really remember what happened for the last 3 years, because
Right.
it'd be sliding timeline, about 3 years of continuity. Or you can set it back to like everybody's 3 years younger, because he is a reality manipulator.
Right.
So he could basically rewind the universe as part of him waking up from his fever dream. However you want to do it, that part I don't really care.
No, but something like that would make sense when you got someone like Franklin Richards, who it's established he can do shit like that.
Yeah.
It's not a hard sell for the customers to pick up and go, oh, well, this actually makes sense as to how it happened.
Yeah. And now it also, honestly, it also unmakes all of the shitty characters that they've added in since the beginning of like the Marvel Now era.
And if Marvel was smart, which, well, we know they really aren't. If these people wanted to turn around and be like, okay, well, I want to reintroduce, say, America Chavez, like, okay, do it right this time.
Yeah, you can do it without all the baggage, because it takes it all out.
It's all gone. Yeah, people wanted, like, oh, well, that happened. Yeah, it did happen, but it's not going to be happening going forward.
Yeah, yes, it happened, but that works. Essentially, it's a tangent universe, and that loops back to itself. And now you can introduce a character like America Chavez again. You can introduce a fucking new warriors. You can introduce a Miss Marvel. But Carol is back at being Warburg.
Right.
She's still struggling. Now maybe Miss Marvel is emulating what the fuck's her name? Not Carol. Spectrum.
Oh, Captain Marvel.
Yeah, Captain Marvel, Spectrum, Monica Rambeau.
Yeah, Monica Rambeau. Yeah.
Maybe that's the person this version looks up to.
Right.
Maybe Carol goes an entirely different direction. It takes all the baggage off these characters that's been getting layered on for the last 10 years. And you can pick and choose, and you might be able to do some of the things the same way or the same stories, but you could do them better. And you could have somebody now be like, oh my God, I remember this happening. This is how bad this turns out. And it could be another hero trying to stop this other character from doing something heroic. Now it automatically moves that person into kind of a villain or maybe an anti-hero, maybe a villain, but otherwise just a antagonist role. Now you might have, set up new rivalries between, Daredevil and Carol Danvers. It would be weird matches, but weird conflicts. But you could do something new.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I think that was one of the greatest things DC had with New 52 was it allowed for that. It
Yeah.
allowed people, with the exception of certain things like Batman's continuity didn't change, and neither did Superman's. Which was, if you're going to do a whole, you could have done something a little different than like that. You could have been like, okay, these two, this Batman and Superman book are still continuing this continuity, but these two over here, we're going to try something a little different and see how it goes.
Yeah, that you're trying to have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
Sorry. You need to, I mean, it's literally,
you got to commit.
Everything. Yeah, you got to commit. You got to bite it. And you got to, I mean, and the thing is, as much as like people laugh at like that Bobby Ewing stepping out of the shower moment, it was a shock, and it came out of, now it kind of came out of nowhere. They had written themselves into a corner, into such a corner that they had no way to get themselves out of. And Marvel's in the same position. So, and rather than building up to it with some giant event that they're going to pussy out on at the last moment, the same way they did Secret Wars.
Yeah.
You do it in a random issue of Fantastic Four. Fantastic Four was the start of the Marvel Universe. It could be the restart of it too.
Yeah, and especially if they want to bring them into the movie universe.
Exactly. Now you could reset. I mean, you could go back even further if you really wanted. You could go back to Onslaught.
Yeah.
And basically start telling stories and go back to the original numbering. Now it's suddenly Fantastic Four 442.
Right.
And, out of nowhere. So the other 300, 250 issues or 300 issues or whatever it is didn't happen.
Yeah. I mean, and Stax makes a good point, though. Marvel would have to take storytelling seriously, which...
Oh, God, yeah.
With the current crop of what they call writers they have, there's no way that's going to happen.
Yeah, and it would throw so much of their precious fucking canon out. And since you'd essentially reset back to let's just say in the opinion of the current writers and editorial, less enlightened era.
Yeah.
They can't just come in and immediately start writing these characters like they're writing them today, because it would go from, everybody with fucking pouches and guns and boob windows to talking about their pronouns
within an issue.
And these characters are just completely different. You'd be like, okay, this isn't the reset I expected. You just changed fucking numbers. No, fuck this. And it wouldn't work. You'd have to go back to writing them. Now, if you wanted to take a little bit of time, and it would take some actual quality writers, but morph them into the characters you want them to be in this more enlightened age, fine. But guess what? You got to work them to get them there. This is your starting point, fuckers. Figure out how to get to where you want. And, I'm from Pittsburgh. I'm used to having routes where somebody asks me, hey, man, how do we get from here to here? And the answer is, you can't.
Right.
And they're like, what do you mean you can't? No. You can't.
You can't.
You have to go to this other place before you go to this place. How does that make any fucking sense? I don't know, dude. We built our trail off deer path. We built our road system off deer paths.
Yeah,
and that's when
you're not wrong.
I know. I'm not wrong. So that would require them to actually learn some skill in writing. And we know they ain't going to do that.
No.
So, but no, I mean, look, that golden era, though, man, I would.
There's no way we're going to get another comic book run of any kind like that again. I don't think. Not for that long. Not with that continual amount of quality.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's just look at Chris's artists. In the 17 years, he had Dave Cockrum, John Byrne, Dave Cockrum again, Paul Smith, John Romita Jr. the first time. Let's see, Rick Leonardi, Mark Silvestri, Jim Lee, I'm pretty sure Barry Windsor Smith, Art Adams. Let's see here. Who else? I know I'm forgetting a couple.
Yeah, but he also had the artist to back up what he was writing.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like it was truly a, I guess you could say, partnership, but Chris had the direction. Everybody else was along for the ride.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Paul Smith. You know what? And I always find that the Paul Smith era wildly underrated. He gets very forgotten, even though he did like a year and a half, almost 2 years on that book. He was kind of a good transitional artist between Dave Cockrum and John Romita Jr.
Right.
Because he had that like slightly boxy style without being as boxy as Romita. Let's see. Barry Windsor Smith, Rick Leonardi, John Romita Jr. Oh, and you had, well, as I said, Barry Windsor Smith. God, Romita was on there for a lot longer than I thought. Brett Blevins. Alan Davis. That's who I'm thinking of forgetting. Alan Davis and Paul Neary. Butch Geese. I can never pronounce Butch's last name, by the way. I feel terrible.
Unfortunately, some people have names that are like that.
But Silvestri, and then feel like, yeah, Silvestri, Leonardi, and then Lee. I mean, that is an absolute fucking murderer's row of artists over 17 years. There's not a flop artist. The least, I guess you could say, accomplished artist, or not accomplished, but the least like marquee artist there was either Rick Leonardi, or who was a fill-in, or Paul Smith. Everyone else there is basically on a fucking Mount Rushmore of comics somewhere. John Romita Jr., Jim Lee, Mark Silvestri, Dave Cockrum, John Byrne. Holy shit.
Yeah. And when you actually sit there and think about it, you're like, God damn.
Yeah.
Like,
Alan Davis.
It wasn't just one of the two parts of making the book come together being good and the other one just being adequate. It was both sides of that equation were good. The stars were aligning for just everything.
Yeah, honestly. I mean,
and you know, the art matched the story, the quality of the art matched the quality of the stories, and the stories were phenomenal.
Like the closest thing that I could compare it to would have been like that probably 7 or 8 years, no, maybe like 10 years of ASM, when you went from Todd McFarlane to Eric Larson to Mark Bagley.
Yeah.
And just it kept going like that whole time.
And that was a pretty good run too, because the stories there were fun.
They were. The only thing is, though, the fill-in artists on ASM weren't anywhere near the quality. I mean, when you're getting fill-in artists of Art Adams, Alan Davis,
they're your fill-ins. You know you're doing something right.
Barry Windsor Smith, and Rick Leonardi. Those are your quote-unquote fill-in artists. Whereas, like, the worst guy that was the fill-in there was Brett Blevins.
Yeah.
Who's still he's a fairly solid. Oh, wait. Rob Liefeld did an issue too.
Yeah. Oh, there you'll have that.
I love Rob.
I have no problem with Liefeld's art. I just find it funny that some of the things you can pick on him about. It's like, sorry, dude, you can say whatever you want, but A, you don't know how to draw feet. you don't know how to draw wrists or can't. Because you notice every one of his characters has something covering their wrists. Every single one.
It could be just the simple fact that he doesn't like drawing the skinny parts.
Could be. But Liefeld definitely has a distinct style, and you know what? And they're in the 90s with him doing like New Mutants and the beginning of X-Force.
I don't know. Did you ever read the couple issues he did of Wolverine?
It's entirely possible I did, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, they were in the 150s. They were solid issues, and he drew plenty of feet. His style has evolved a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
I like his older one better. His modern style, yes, it's more polished. It's a lot of his flaws that he had early in his career have been covered up or essentially fixed nearly completely. But there's not as much kinetic energy to it. There was energy in Rob's 90s stuff that you could put the best 10 artists in comics together right now, and I don't know they have the same energy that Rob Liefeld did. He had, whether he was good, whether he was like artistically or critically or, whatever, good, he sold the fuck out of comic books to kids because it looked super fun. Which is something that I can't think of many artists today that are capable of doing. I mean,
no, there isn't many at all, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, can we what? You think Erica Henderson's Squirrel Girl art style was selling to anybody?
No.
I mean, maybe a couple of, weirdos.
No matter who draws Squirrel Girl, the way she's written, that's all you're going to attract are the weirdos.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, just the art style. If you're just looking at the art, I can't think of a single art style that, I mean, yeah, I guess the same people that really, really like that like bean mouth animation style might be attracted to some of the Marvel and DC art styles, like artists right now, but not many.
No.
And I don't think that that's a big real target demo that are interested in, that aren't currently comic book readers to become comic book readers.
No, I agree. It's the same thing with any media. If you're going to try to make something have more appeal, but you make it too much of a mainstream appeal, you're going to get, you're still going to get people, but nowhere near as many as you might get if you narrowed that focus a little bit more.
Yeah. Okay, what are we aiming for here? Gender questioning loners that watch Steven Universe? Fuck, you're right. I think that's a little too narrow.
Yeah, you can't go too narrow, but at the same time, you can't cast the net so wide and then focus on the minute parts that you're pulling in with that wide cast net.
Yeah, like whereas Rob was like, what are we aiming for? What is our target demo here? Every kid that plays with G.I. Joes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Even his concepts of his art style with like the pouches everywhere and the absolute badass looking characters, so on and so forth, that even carried over into video games.
Oh yeah, it did. But it was what is our target audience? Every single kid that plays with G.I. Joes.
Yeah.
That is what Rob was targeting with X-Force and New Mutants.
Mm-hmm.
Jim Lee was targeting basically the same kids. Mark Silvestri, same kids. And do you know what? Todd, maybe he was targeting all the kids that played with He-Man.
Right. Same kind of concept, just a little.
Yeah, just a slight difference.
Mhm.
One is like, okay, I want the He-Man kids. Well, I want the G.I. Joe kids. Well, I want the Lego kids. Well, I want the Transformers kids.
Right.
And guess what? A lot of those were crossover. So they managed to get a good chunk of them.
Yeah. I mean, people aren't kidding when they say there was a comics boom in the 90s, and it wasn't entirely due to speculators. They have more of a hand, I think, in the downfall of the comics industry in the 90s, more so than the boom.
Publishers that were...
Because we had more media dedicated to comic book characters at that point. You started seeing more video games come out.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you had the X-Men cartoon. You had this the second Spider-Man cartoon.
Honestly, I still blame a lot of the crash on Image. And Image books just not making their deadlines.
Yeah, because I mean, that was around the time when my uncle owned his comic book store, and I remember talking to him a little bit about it. And it's just like, oh yeah, the hype for these are going to be, you know, worth so much money. And it's like they're not even out yet.
Well, but you saw with, I mean, like and the thing is, there's a way I look at, and it's something I talk about fairly often anytime the issue of sales and comic sales and growing an audience comes up. And anytime somebody's like, oh yeah, the next step in comics is these released annually original graphic novels as the sole release format at $30. And I just say, enjoy bankruptcy.
Yeah, that's not going to work.
You know why? Because of basic, like, consumer psychology.
People will forget about it.
They do. They forget about it. It happened in the 90s. You had Wildcats 1, and then 2, and then there was a little delay on 3, and then a bigger delay on 4, and then a couple month delay for 5.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a line between anticipation and like causing people to want it more,
right?
And delays causing them to stop give a fuck.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think if I remember right, the only Image book when Image first launched that released somewhat regularly was Spawn.
Correct.
And even then, after a while, he ran into his own problems when he made. I remember a lot of people when he made the comment of, "Oh, I'm gonna have other people doing the art for a while." People were like, "I'm buying this book because of your art."
Yeah. And then he started getting Capullo as the regular artist.
Mm-hmm.
And it lost its steam. And I don't think he's ever drawn a regular monthly book since he left he did like the one Spawn Batman. He's gonna
he's done like one-offs, but I don't think he's done a regular book in a long, long time.
Yeah, where he's actually had to hit a monthly schedule. So you saw it with Youngblood.
Yeah.
Youngblood was hugely popular. It was gonna keep selling 500,000 copies each month. It would have for a couple
if it came
more
out
years, but then it got delayed. Rob, Jim, all these other guys, they started taking it for granted. And they forgot that they had to keep grinding. Their grind is what got them there, and the grind was what was going to keep them there. They're not Brock Lesnar being able to show up. There's a reason why Lesnar isn't the draw he was, because he only shows up 5 times a year now.
Right.
That's why Austin,
Andre the Giant, he is not.
Yeah, Austin managed to be that fucking like biggest draw ever because he grinded every week. Even when he was hurt, he was still grinding. And so you had, now granted, this is before you could adjust your, before there was a final order cutoff, before Delays caused things to be returnable or allow another adjustment in ordering and all that other stuff that came out as a result of this. But you ended up with people. It's one thing for it to be 1 month late. You saw that it being successful with like the Ultimates. Remember when Hitch and Miller were on the Ultimates, and issue 12 ended up really late, but it sold like fucking gangbusters. Same with McNiven and Miller on Civil War. It sold big, even with the delays. But then you get stuff like Saga.
Yeah.
Saga was so big. And they're like, yeah, we're taking a 6-month hiatus, which turned into like what, 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, now people just don't care about it anymore.
And then by the time it came back out, nobody gives a fuck. Saga's back to being a nothing book.
You know how it runs into that problem a lot, at least as far as animation is concerned? The guys who do the Venture Brothers.
Yeah. Because there's there's a fine line between anticipation and losing interest, and all of them have a tendency of getting too close to that line and crossing it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I love that show. I think it's fucking priceless. But
I've never been a huge fan. I understand its appeal. It's not really my thing. But I get it. But yeah, all that, I remember the hype around it, what, 15, 18 years ago?
Yeah, there's multiple seasons, but it's like the delay between each season's like, okay, what are you guys doing?
And longer and longer. And you're gonna lose your audience. You see it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look, the one thing that comics has for it, especially, I laugh at this. Comics has a tendency of playing catch up and like copying other industries.
Yeah.
Including copying their liabilities, which is something that comics doesn't have. The liability, like the flaws and the drawbacks of television, is actual people and filming schedules.
Mm-hmm.
They only are allowed to film for a certain period of time per year because the actors need time off. They want to go on vacation for months. They want to go act in a movie. They want to go do some Broadway plays. Guess what? They can't do a monthly, an every single week series. That's why you don't have 52 episode seasons. Comics can. You get like getting back to the idea of, but they started going into the seasons thing. Comics has started copying the flaws and deficiencies of television by going to a season model.
Yeah.
For no fucking reason. Well, TV is successful and they have seasons.
Video games
so we should have seasons. TV's trying to copy comics.
Yeah.
TV literally started copying comic books and radio serials that didn't have those same inherent drawbacks of time for pre-production and post-production, time for actors and actresses to take off, because all it was the creatives.
Yeah.
And if you substituted out, like, because the artist is a little slow that month and might get, he has 6 issues done, but you're almost, we had like 2 in the can before he started, and you're almost and he's about to be late. Guess what? You already had an inventory story by another artist and maybe the same writer that you could shove in there. Right. You can't do that with TV. You can't just shove like, well, it's Johnny Depp as the star of 21 Jump Street. But this weekend is a filler This week's is a filler episode with Bob Smith playing the role of whoever the fuck Johnny Depp played on that show.
Right. It's
you can't do that.
No, you can't.
But you can with comics. Comic readers will accept the fill-in artist periodically. They'll accept the fill-in writer periodically. But if you decided to change all the characters, you can't do that either. So that's the drawback of television, is that they have to work around the real life schedule of real life actors. Comics doesn't have that same deficiency.
No, it's just a writer and the artist.
It's a writer, artist, colorist, inker. And you can shove in an inventory story whenever the fuck you feel like it, or fill in.
Yeah.
And
the
nobody's
colorist and the inker are working regardless.
Yeah. So if the artist is a little slow and it takes him 32 days to draw an issue instead of 30 or 28 or whatever it is, cool. So we know we can go into it planning every 5 issues he's going to need a fill-in. All right, good. We know ahead of time. When he wants to take a vacation and go away with his family, he lets us know a few months ahead of time, and we can modify the script to make sure
you have something to build up to use while he's gone.
Yeah, so we're not shoving in a fill-in in the middle of a story arc. They don't have those same deficiencies. Yet at the same time, they start copying all the flaws and weaknesses of television, because television make more money, therefore it better, right? Yeah. Fucking retarded people.
It doesn't work like that. Not when it comes to entertainment media.
No. So comics has, between that and never having to worry about budget.
Yeah.
It costs the exact same amount to draw 2 people sitting in a coffee shop or an alien invasion. Exact same amount.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no special effects. There's no, sound effects. There's no pyro. Yeah. There's no nothing.
Yeah. You don't got any of that shit. It's still one asshole with his pencil, ink, and a piece of paper.
That's something I think.
What goes on the page?
I think that's one of the things that had a hand in sinking a lot of indie wrestling promotions in the 90s. Oh, well, WCW and WWF have pyro. We got to have pyro too.
Yeah.
Do you know how expensive pyro is? Do you know how expensive that freaking permit is to be able to do it indoors?
Yeah.
Paying for the tech to do it?
Exactly. And all those techs make some bank.
It's not like your Uncle Bob on 4th of July lighting off a bunch of fucking Roman candles.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you could do that, and then you end up with, what was that band? Great
White.
Yeah. That ended up pretty poorly.
Yeah, that didn't go well. There's a reason why Rammstein tones down their stage show in the States.
Yeah. But so, they're missing the point here. The whole comic industry is just completely forgot where all their strengths lie. And instead of has insisted on copying other people, including giving breaks. That's why do you think you have television shows where the maximum? I mean, I'm not talking about your Simpsons, your MASH, and your Cheers.
Right.
And I'm talking about and South Park. I'm talking about your run-of-the-mill television drama.
It's anywhere from 1 to 3 seasons.
Yeah. 5 seasons is a miracle. 6 seasons is a massive success.
Yeah. I mean, another one of those that I don't put into the same category as Simpsons as far as length, but as far as it also took them a couple seasons to really get rolling, though, was Married with Children.
Absolutely.
Completely, massive cultural popularity, but it didn't catch on.
Oh, yeah.
Until like the 6th season or so.
Yeah, exactly. But those, you don't have comic books if they're going out, if your marquee characters can't even carry your book for 6 years.
Yeah.
That's considered a failure. It's not even considered a success. That's not even a marquee character. That's your like D-listers. That's fucking Darkhawk and Sleepwalker.
Right.
That's the Midnight Suns. That's, some random iteration of Ghost Rider or Morbius. That's not Spider-Man. That's not Superman. That's
not
Batman.
Wolverine.
Yeah.
It's not the X-Men. It's not anything. None of the teams really. Pretty much all the teams, at least nowadays, have at least a degree of popularity to them where that book isn't really endangerment, so to speak, other than bad writers.
Yeah.
Everybody knows who the Justice League is. Everybody knows who the Avengers are.
It's
once you start getting past the X-Men, and once you start getting past those three, though, it starts going the Justice Society of who?
Yeah, the Legion of what?
Well, the Legion. That's unless you know comic books, that's a whole can of worms.
I understand that, but and whenever there's multiple iterations of the same thing, where they can't decide if they're the Teen Titans or Young Justice or just the Titans.
Yep.
They can't decide if they're the Legion of Superheroes, the Legionnaires, the Avengers West Coast, or Force Works.
Yeah.
That's when you start getting into brand confusion. But so you end up with books that aren't able to carry themselves in perpetuity. But at the same time, okay, yeah, you know what? A show like Castle or NCIS might last for 6 to 10 years.
Yeah, most of those shows have been on for a while.
But do you know what blows them out of the water? Days of Our Fucking Lives.
Oh God, yeah, or General Hospital.
And guess what? Those people have the most loyal fucking viewers.
Oh yeah.
They're watching every single week.
Or day in some cases.
Yeah, in some cases day. You're doing hundreds of episodes a year. On some of these shows. And that's more of what comics is like.
Yeah.
They're more akin to Days of Our Fucking Lives in General Hospital than they are to NCIS and
Castle or whatever.
Yeah. Or Criminal Minds. Yes, the other ones might be a little more prestige. But guess what? Them people in Days of Our Lives are still fucking working after 60 years.
And probably making good money.
Yeah. Hell, I'm pretty sure that show's been on. There's some of them that started as fucking radio broadcasts, got turned into TV shows, and are still on now.
I remember as a kid, my mom would watch Days of Our Lives. I'm in my 40s.
Yeah.
And it already was going for a while at that point.
It was already 25 years in you had to know about.
I mean, I think it's funny that, that's something they don't seem to understand. But I think also at the same time, a lot of these writers, and we all know this, they can say whatever the fuck they want, but they all want a deal in Hollywood.
Oh,
TV, movies, Netflix, whatever. And it's like, okay, but, for example, Jeff Johns, whether you love him, like him, hate him, whatever, he wasn't trying to write TV shows in comic book form.
No.
He was writing comic books, and he got picked up because of his work writing comic books, not because he was trying to write a TV show. Like, here's kind of a sample script, guys. Yeah, no.
Yeah, Bendis was very obviously writing a TV show for, Powers.
Right. But I think that was also being produced at the same time.
No. He had done Powers because he started Powers back in the late 90s.
Oh, okay.
Over at Image. And it didn't end up on that PlayStation Network.
Yeah.
The 2 seasons that it got there, that wasn't until the early 2010s.
Right. Okay.
So it was 15 years after the book had launched. So no. But there's other ones that are absolutely like Naomi, completely written as a TV show. So many of them these days, so many of the writers. And what they need to decide is, do they want to try to be TV, which might have a shelf life of 1 to 10 years. If it's really like any one season is, you got to be at least okay.
Yeah.
10 seasons, you're one of the best shows in history. Do you want to be that, but only get work for 10 years and then all your characters are fucking useless?
Yeah.
Because nobody cares about any of those characters after the shows are off the air. And that's what you're doing in your comics. Or do you want to be Days of Our Lives? Which, yeah, might be considered trash TV, might be mostly watched by middle-aged women at home during the workday. But guess what? It's on for 70 fucking years.
Mm-hmm. You got to pick your niche and stick to it. That was something the X-Men were doing back during the Claremont run.
Yeah.
They knew who their audience was.
And you know what? The more that people got exposed to it, the more that they kept buying more of it. More people started buying more of it.
Yeah. For a long time, for as long as I can remember growing up, the X-Men, after a certain point, was one of the top selling books.
Yeah.
For a long time.
After there was, and now Batman did have a downturn.
Well, let's rephrase that. Best-selling Marvel book.
No. Well, what I'm getting at is Batman actually started declining in sales in the 90s, which was surprising considering it's his Hollywood success around the time.
Yeah,
it was overexposed. They started doing too many gimmicky shit with it, with the Nightfall and the Azrael and this and that. But Diamond and all the way that comic sales numbers were determined was referred to, and it still is to this day, as the Batman Index.
Right.
Everything was percentages of Batman sales. And the thing was, X-Men ended up for such a long period of time dominating that number that there was actual serious consideration to changing the index to the X-Men Index.
Wow.
That was shortly before I think it was shortly before they split the books and went with Uncanny and X-Men.
Right.
And there was still talk of it afterwards. And then there was just, well, there's too many, but there's 2 primary X books. They were dead set on changing it from the Batman Index to the X-Men Index. The only problem is Marvel fucked it up by having 2 X-Men books.
Right.
And they were like, well, do we just do the combined sales of both of them?
Yeah, I mean, I understand why they wanted to do a second book, and it does kind of make sense because the story was moving at that kind of pace where having 2 books a month would be useful.
Yeah.
But half the time they weren't telling 2 different sides of the same story.
Half the time they were telling 2 different stories, and the other half of the time they were basically writing it as one weekly book or one bi-weekly book. So
again, they dropped the ball there.
Yeah, they did. But there was very serious consideration of changing the index to the X-Men Index because it was so popular. X-Men is to this day in name recognition. Sorry, it still beats Avengers.
Yeah, it does. It absolutely does. People remember the X-Men arcade game. They don't remember the Avengers one.
Nope.
And there were a couple. They
remember the X-Men cartoon. They don't remember any of the Avengers cartoons.
I can't
remember. There were multiples.
Were there before the X-Men? I know there have been a couple.
They were after the X-Men cartoons, but there was a couple of them after the X-Men cartoon.
And everybody remembers the X-Men cartoon.
Yeah. Nobody remembers other than laughing at the Fantastic Four cartoon because they replaced Human Torch with Herbie.
Yeah.
Because the network didn't want kids setting themselves on fire. That was literally it. It's also why Firestar instead of Human Torch in Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. Same exact logic. But regardless, so you ended up they've comics has, I think it fails to see what it has at its disposal that all of the other industries are seeking to emulate and failing. And instead, they're looking at those other industries that are copying themselves, that are copying comics with flaws, and then copying those flaws. I mean, we're back to, hey, look, we're back, kind of come full circle in this conversation, back to a multiplicity joke. It's a Xerox of a Xerox, and it ends up fucking retarded.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. But on that note, I'm going to wrap us up. We've been going for 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel like it, but we've been going for a while.
I know. It's great to have these kind of conversations. They can just kind of go free form anywhere. I love it, man. Thanks.
Oh yeah, anytime, man. We're definitely gonna have to do this more, see if we can get a couple more people to join us on our shenanigans.
Yes.
But like I said, you can catch Doc every Saturday morning at the channel I'm going to be posting in chat right now for all the people that are still here in chat. If you're not subscribed to the Thinking Critical channel, do so. Wes is a great guy. You can find Doc there. Bunch of other people on that panel. They're really good people.
Yep.
Although the Fatal J guy is kind of sketchy.
Yeah. Well,
sarcastic.
that's because he just likes talking about the fucking Snyderverse.
Yeah. Well, the Snyderverse fans, you got to watch them.
I know they are kind of sketchy.
But for people still in the chat, if you like hearing what I have to say and want to see me make fun of Matt from Foul Ball Productions, come hang out with us on his channel on Thursday for our gaming stream. And then go check out his channel on Friday for the MFR Cocktail Lounge. It's always a good time. Who knows what we'll be talking about that night. I'm usually there. May not be there this week, depending on how work goes, but we shall see. And other than that, thank you very much for joining us and spending your evening with us talking random shit about X-Men and other comic book related stuff. So until the next time, everyone, have yourself a great night.
Later, yo.